Hey, what's good, everybody? Welcome to another live session with the Hype Magazine. I'm your editor-in-chief, Jerry Doby, and today I have an amazing personality from the media by the name of Rick Sanchez. You might have seen him on CNN. He had his own show on CNN. He's been on Fox. Oh my God. And then, of course, one of his own iHeart Radio. And he and his partner, Saul Trujillo, were part of the founding group for the primary care provider Cano Health, which is traded on the NASDAQ. So we've got a very valuable person on here today to bring some insight as to what's going on. Thank you so much, Rick. I appreciate you.
Thanks, Jerry. Fun talking to you, man. This is going to be great.
It's going to be fun, man. It's going to be fun. So look, we're just getting to meet you. So from the inside looking out, give me Rick Sanchez.
I am part of something that is happening in America that is a movement. It's more than just being able to create a media outlet that gives something to a specific cohort or demographic. It's bigger than that. There is a movement in America. It's called the New American Mainstream. We tend to call it Latino Plus only because Latinos tend to be the biggest nut when it comes to this because we're now 20% of the population. But the Latino Plus, the New American Mainstream, is a younger, more vibrant economic force that no one seems to be paying any attention to because too many Americans are still living in the 1950s and 60s and somehow thinking there's a Cold War going on and stuff like that, when there's a new reality. It's truly a movement. When we say Latino Plus, for example, we mean Latinos plus Asian Americans, LGBT Americans, African Americans, all who are sharing in the culture, and of course, you know, Anglo Americans. I married a hillbilly girl from Georgia, and my son is his fiance is from Iraq, and there's a lot of cross-cultural, national, cross-lingual. There is a lot of that going on in America today, and it doesn't seem to be defined by anyone. So we decided to trademark it. We call it Latino Plus. It's also part of the New American Mainstream. And if you start let me give you some numbers because this is always fun, right? If you start just with Latinos, which I know you're interested in, what is this Latino cohort that's becoming very, very large? If Latinos in the United States were a country unto themselves, they would be the third fastest growing GDP in the world, only behind China and India, and ahead of the United States itself.
Wow.
Think about that for a minute, right? $2.7 trillion is what they are essentially amassing for this economy. If they were a country unto themselves, forget growth, just a country. Like if we stacked all the countries in the world by GDP, Latinos in the United States would be 7th. I mean, it's a very entrepreneurial group. It's a group that is oftentimes underserved and underrepresented. Place I used to work, for example, CNN. Again, we're 20% of the population. Guess what percentage of Latinos appear on CNN as a guest or, you know, as an expert or, you know, the things they do on those cable channels? Less than 2%. Less than 2%, Jerry.
Yeah.
I mean, so it is a community that has a voice, has something to say. It's not just the Latinos, because Latinos are bigger than Latinos. Latinos are part of this new movement that involves all the other cohorts that I just described. And that in and of itself is where we're going. That's the audience that we want to create a movement around.
Look, you're doing an amazing job, and it's well needed. I come up from South Central Los Angeles. I spent a lot of time in Huntington Park and Cudahy and places like that. My second wife was from Cuba, and so I'm a practicing Santero, so I understand kind of what you're talking about and how that demographic is marginalized and often swept under the rug.
And it's an opportunity, right? Because
it's a huge opportunity.
If you think about it, so what is unique about this community, this entire new block of Americans? By the way, here's another stat I'm going to throw at you. This one's going to, are you ready to get completely blown away? Because I'm going to give you a stat that's going to blow you away, Jerry. Ready? The common age, according to Pew Research, of a Latino in America today is 11.
Wow.
The most common age of a Latino in America today is 11. You want me to tell you what the most common age of an Anglo-American?
Probably 30.
58.
Ooh.
11, 58. Dude, I mean, so and nobody's, I just watched some network, I don't remember which one it was, put out its new commercial saying they're going to reach a streaming audience now. They're going to stop doing just terrestrial TV, and they're going to do a streaming audience. And I watched their spot, and it didn't even include a Latino in it. And I'm thinking, dude, I mean, just throw us in the bunch, will you? I mean, throw me a bone. Latinos were not even in the thing. I mean, they weren't even included in the representation of, of their commercial, which certainly makes you think, God, you guys, your commercials are almost as dumb as the newscast you guys put on the air. And I say that because what is it when we say, okay, big deal, Sanchez. There's this new American mainstream. You're right. There's this new young cohort in America. It's Black, it's Asian, it's LGBT, it's very Latino. But what is it about them? Well, I'll tell you what it is, Jerry. They have a wider angle lens. They have a different way of seeing the world. All this crap we see when we watch television, for example, this younger American, this new American mainstream, the future of this country, they don't see, my kids especially, the younger they are, the more, they turn on these cable channels and they watch this Wolf Blitzer dude and this Tucker Carlson and these, and they're a joke to them. It's like, what are you talking about? Right. None of that stuff is relevant anymore. I mean, they're talking about going to war and the politics of this and Trump versus Biden. And it's like, the battle of the old men, when in fact, real changes and real new things and trends and cultures are happening in our lives right now. And unfortunately, we know them and we're going to talk about them. But generally speaking, the media, it just doesn't live there. It doesn't get these folks.
I'm a Black man, but I say that, having been, exposed to the Latino culture on multiple fronts, that the media is more concerned with including Black people and forgets, the Latino and this is Asian Pacific Islanders and things like that. But they forget a lot of the backbone that created the country, some of the hardest workers. And for you Black people out there, I would like for you to remember that Mexico was the first North American country to provide haven for escaped slaves. So we are in this together, and we should, support one another. So here I am with Agua Media, Rick Sanchez. Let's talk about the podcast platform that's coming. We've got some really amazing shows as described in the release. Talk to me about Agua and podcasts.
We've got podcasts that are basically going to do what I was just trying to say, and that is that, it's hard to explain to folks, but it really is a new reality out there. So we think by talking to people who understand the world the way we see it, which is very different from the traditional or old-fashioned kind of America, because America's being remodeled. This melting pot is being remodeled once again, and in a good way, I think, in a really good way. So we're doing What Would Frida Do? Frida Coel, which is one of the most famous women in the history of Latin America, and always known as a Mexicana from the 1925 era, who believed in womanhood. She believed that a young woman should just, in 1925, she was saying this, a young woman should have the same rights culturally, sexually, educationally as any man. And she fought for that. And she's become kind of a legend in the Latina and non-Latina community as well. And we're teaming up with, I don't want to say the network just in case it hasn't been announced yet. We're teaming up with a partner who's a very well-known actual media company, and they're going to help us put this show out that's going to be called What Would Frida Do? I'm going to do a podcast, and it's, you've heard of Joe Rogan, the Joe
Yeah.
Rogan Experience.
Yeah.
Well, mine's going to be called the Rick Sanchez Attitude.
Okay.
And we call it latitude because it's latitude, like Latino attitude. And to a certain extent, you know, after interviewing 5 presidents, being on CNN, being on Fox, being on NBC, doing the news on iHeart, as you mentioned earlier, and all of these experience, what I've learned from working in all those places is that they're all full of crap. So,
Tell it.
so but yet, so I want to just be a truth teller, you know, and I want to go out there and talk about the world we live in and some of the stories and current events that are going on, but with a sense of reality, with a sense of what we're used to talking about, not the stuff you say on TV because you work for some corporation,
Right.
where, you know, the corporation kind of controls what you need to say because there's certain things that they want said. I hate that. And I think the average member of the new American mainstream gets that, which is why they're repelling those kind of shows. So that's, you know, that's what I hope to be able to do. We're also going to be doing a show called Meet Your Heroes with a young couple, which is unbelievably funny. It's a husband and wife, and they talk about the experience in America, the multicultural experience in America that we're really looking forward to. Julissa Arce is a 3-time bestseller. She is an undocumented immigrant who rose to the level of being one of the highest VPs at Morgan Stanley, and eventually lost her job when they found out that her citizenship wasn't exactly right. But they loved her. She was one of the smartest people in the company, and then she kind of took a fall as a result. But you know what? She's got a hell of a story to tell. Okay. She understands America. She understands the experience of America, of what it's like for her. And she's going to have a podcast where she takes us through historical moments, as you were just mentioning, that have happened in the past with Latinos who, for some reason, they never made the pages of history. You don't read it in the textbooks where we go to school, but she knows them, and she's going to share them. And I think they're empowering. I mean, I could go on, but we've got a great lineup of podcasts that we think are going to kind of make a difference for this particular audience, Jer.
Amazing. I think what people are missing, you know, they're not paying attention, but the urban media, the collective, you know, the melanated people, our media outlets are slowly but surely becoming the tier 1.
Yes.
As opposed to being relegated to tier 4. And because we're telling each other's stories and our own personal stories to people who are looking for an anchor, you know, with their culture, with their history, and we're providing that on multiple levels. So I applaud you for what you're doing. There are a lot of lost young Latinos out here, just as there are a lot of lost minorities. They don't know, you know, maybe they know Chicano culture because they were born down the line in LA, you know, in Bell Gardens somewhere, and it was, you know, the lowriders, the, you know, whatever. But, you know, and they know about Pancho Villa or Shea, but they don't really know about some of the important cultural aspects and contributions that they've made, not just in America, but globally. So
yeah, you said something a little while ago. I mean, let's just, because it's fun, let's talk a little history.
Let's go.
We are raised to think that the first Thanksgiving was celebrated in Plymouth Rock.
Right.
Wrong. The first Thanksgiving was celebrated in St. Augustine, Florida, by the very first Europeans who came to the United States, who did not speak English. They spoke Spanish. They were the, you know, so-called Spanish conquistadors, who were extremely abusive, by the way, when they were in the islands, the Caribbean, Haiti, Cuba, Puerto Rico, Dominican Republic. But here in the United States, they actually were more kind, and comparatively speaking, of course, more kind, more generous, and more giving to both Native American and African American slaves would leave South Carolina and go to Florida because they wanted to be with the Spaniards, not the Anglo colonists, who did not. For example, the Spaniards married them and allowed them to intermarry and respected the marriage and would not break it up. The Anglo colonists didn't do that.
Right.
So, you know, I'm going to say something a little off color here, but I think it's kind of in keeping with our culture as well. I'm Cuban, and you have some Cuban roots, as they say, as well. But they've always said that the greatest thing that the Spanish culture ever created was something that for some reason the Anglo culture didn't. And the name of it is the mulatto or mulata. So for some reason, the Spaniards found the kinship with both the Native Americans and the African Americans, so much so that they were more apt to breed or interbreed. And that's why we have so many people who look like you and me,
Yeah.
who are all kinds of combinations of color and stuff like that. And that's a good thing.
Right.
You know, that's a good thing.
So. It was crazy because I you know, like I said, I lived in the Latin section of LA. So but to find blue black people who didn't speak any freaking English, they only spoke Spanish.
Yeah,
that was my biggest surprise, you know, when entering that community. I was like, okay, I'm talking to English and he's going, hey, no entiendo, you know. I'm like, oh, so now I have to adapt, you know, and I had a great time with everything. So I just think that we need to share the histories. We need to share the magnificence. And, you know, while we're talking about slavery, slavery was looked at differently in many parts of the world. Whereas, like you said, the Spanish would allow them to marry and respect that, have their own religion, et cetera, et cetera. They connected with the African culture. And Africans didn't have the same outlook. You know, slaves were like the money keepers, the treasurers, and the babysitters, and everything. They took care of the house. They ran the homes and things like that. They were trusted parts of the home. And a lot of them were, you know, war hostages or whatever you want to say, POW, that, you know, were taken as slaves, and they were treated differently. The Latin culture treated the slaves a little bit differently than, of course, the Anglos. The Anglos, they were just pieces of meat. And now it's turned into, we're just a freaking social security number that's traded on the stock exchange. I won't go there, but anyway.
No, it's fodder. No, there's no, if you read a little bit about this, and by the way, that's not to say that the Spanish were perfect and that there was no prejudice. There was plenty of it and a lot of abuse and everything else. But there was at least a differentiation that's worth looking at just to understand how the cultural norms developed over time, or if nothing else, just because we need to know something other than this, you know, than what is an incomplete history lesson.
Right.
Which is, unfortunately, most of us have received in the United States, an 100%. Incomplete history lesson. Yeah. 100%. Not to mention the civil rights movement was just as much Latino, using the word you used just a little while ago, very Chicano. The civil rights movement of the 1960s was joined by Cesar Chavez and was joined by groups in both Texas and New Mexico and Arizona and California. And it was just as big a part of it. And sometimes we forget that as well. We think it was only Martin Luther King. It was more than Martin Luther King involved in that battle at that time. And that's just a cool story to know, but you know, it's seldom told. Seldom told.
Folks forget about it, that the Irish people were also disdained, and Catholics were also disdained here in this country by those, and they were part of the civil rights movement, and the Jews, of course. You know what I mean? So we got such a rich history of being united that I think that, you know, an opportunity to speak with you and let's talk about Agua and what it's doing and how it's presenting the stories and the depth that they'll go into and in helping to free our damn minds, excuse my language. You know what I mean? So wait a minute. I heard something about you like advised a couple of presidents.
I have. Well, you know, I have been fortunate enough in my career to have you know, I've got a couple of Peabody Awards, which is the highest distinction anybody could win. I've got like 2 or 3 national Emmys. I've interviewed President, believe it or not, I was a very young man. Don't laugh at me, but I actually interviewed when I was just a baby. I was a young reporter in Miami, just starting out, and I had a chance to concoct or to finagle my way into a situation where I got to interview Ronald Reagan. So
Wow.
he was the first president. I interviewed Barack Obama, Ronald Reagan, Jimmy Carter, who I adore. I've interviewed Mikhail Gorbachev. I've interviewed I've interviewed Fidel Castro, one of the few people who's ever sat down with Fidel Castro. I interviewed Mariel Noriega in a maximum security prison behind bars in jail, where I asked him if he had actually worked for the CIA and if that's the reason that they really wanted to take him down, to which he said, I worked for the CIA. And I was like, wow. It's like, so we create our own demons because our foreign policy is just a joke. And in so many ways today, when I think after covering all of these stories and knowing so much about some of these things, I'm watching now as the media is doing everything possible to try and start World War III. As I turn on CNN and MSNBC and Fox and all these stations, and they're actually inviting generals or former generals, who, by the way, all work for military contractors, like egging them on. Why are we not attacking? Why are we not going in there with more bombs? Why aren't we providing? And I'm thinking, why do you, I know World War III would be good for ratings, but we're all going to freaking die. Stop it, Yeah. And yet that seems to be the underlying message here. That's not to say to defend Putin. I mean, he's a SOB, obviously, and I feel terrible for the Ukrainian people, but to a certain extent, you also have to ask, who are we, a country that has invaded something like 5 countries in the last 20 years, to be castigating another country for invading a country? Not that it's right, but, context is important, damn it. Yeah. And nowadays, again, this audience that you and I know, the new American mainstream audience, the young audience, they look at this and they go, am I in a Fellini movie? I mean, does Anderson Cooper or this guy or Tucker Carlson, do these guys not know when they interview and they do stories about a country invading another country that we just recently invaded Iraq and Afghanistan and 50,000 children have died in Yemen, and that Libya and Syria and all this other stuff? I mean, it's almost like they move on to the next story and forget everything that happened before it. And you can't do that. We just
did an airstrike in Somalia. We just did an airstrike in Somalia. Nobody's talking about that, for God's sake. Putin's doing his thing in Ukraine. We're attacking Somalia.
And it's not to say it may not have been necessary here or there. I'm not criticizing the policy per se. I'm criticizing the lack of depth of context given to the story, which is a problem that we have today. And this is the kind of thing I think that creates that wide angle lens that I'm talking about, that we want to change, because it's what younger people want. It's what multicultural people want. They see the world differently,
They want to know, and I'm a retired combat soldier. I just retired in 2013. So I've been there, done that, got the t-shirt, smelled the smoke, did all that.
Wow. Good for you.
They want to know, it was a fair trade. They saw a young wolf, they gave him the tools to be a better wolf, and send him off to go do what a wolf does. What can I say? But
gives you a perspective, though, my friend. Jared,
no, brother, when I came back, I, was slapped in the face with Trayvon Martin. I was slapped in the face with some of these other things, the shootings, Floyd, and this, that, and the other. I'm going, this uniform that I'm holding to be buried in, I wanted to burn it. I felt betrayed, pissed off, et cetera, et cetera. And there are a lot of young people out there from all races that are feeling betrayed. They're irritated, they're feeling lied to, and they're awake and realizing that we're not getting the whole damn story. So we need you guys to help. And
Trayvon Martin, a young man killed in his father's backyard, accused of being a thief with a gun.
Trayvon Martin,
neither a thief nor did he have a gun. And who the hell are you to shoot me when I'm in my father's backyard? A part of the story that doesn't seem to be ever told enough, by the way. He was in his father's backyard when this guy came up to him and killed him.
That's crazy.
I had to get that out. I'm sorry. Still makes me mad when I think about it.
There are a lot of stories that are neglected. And so I think it's important. And you'll have my full support editorially from the Hype Magazine side, man. Share us with the newest episodes. We'll carry them and aggregate them with you. So most definitely have a friend over here. I want to know, though, what was the defining moment that brought Rick Sanchez into the media realm?
It's funny. I was going to school at the University of Minnesota. I'd gotten a football scholarship. I was actually kind of fast once, before the belly.
Right.
And I had a professor who came up to me and he said, there is the University of Minnesota going to be given a scholarship. They want to give a scholarship to a young man or a young woman in America. They would prefer that they be a minority, and they want to represent something other than what the media looks like back then when I was going to school, which was lily white. I mean, lily white, right? And I said, and I remember I told my brother, Jerry, and my brother said, no. He said, you don't go to college to be a reporter. You go to college to be an engineer, a lawyer, a doctor. You can't do that. And it would be like betraying our mom and dad who are, fighting to keep you there and everything. And I said, well, so they offered the scholarship to me after interviewing like 1,000 people or so. And I went to the University of Minnesota, the Eric Everett School of Journalism, and I studied under the auspices of CBS News. And this was a while ago. And I was one of the very first. There was me, an African-American kid, and a Native American kid. And three of us got that CBS scholarship that year. And it was a big deal, man. Free education. You got to do an internship in CBS News.
Wow.
And the opportunity was too great to miss out. So I told my brother, I said, I'm going to be a journalist, and I'm going to go into television. And he goes, have you turned on your TV lately? Do you see anybody who looks like you? You'll never get a job. And I was like, well, I'll try my chances. I ended up graduating. I became one of the youngest, highest rated anchors in the history of Florida. I went on to work for NBC, CBS, and Fox, and, the whole 9 yards. So, it turned out okay. But in the process, me being the kind of person that I've always been, I got myself fired more than anything else because I break rules, because I think sometimes those who don't question things are the ones who have the most to answer for. So I've always been the kind of person who's looked at things sideways and then turned it around and looked at it again. And it's got me in a little bit of trouble. But I think in the end, I have fallen as a result of that many times. But I always say to people when they ask me about falling, I say, you should fall down in your life as much as possible. And every time you fall, quickly turn around, look at the person behind you, because if they tripped you, thank them. Thank them. Because every time you fall, you get better and you grow. And that's what that's what it's all about, growing. So thank God I've grown a lot in my life because of the experiences I've had. Most of the growth has been not when I've been on top and not when I've succeeded, Jerry, but when I've been at the bottom and had to remake myself.
Well, what buttressed your intestinal fortitude to continue going when knowing that not only were your own people doubting the opportunity that you might have, but the outside world was saying, no, we don't want you here?
I think a lot of that has to do with need. If you don't have something that you're fighting for, find it. And whether it's your wife or your son or your mission, have something that keeps you going, no matter what it is, because there'll be a time in your life when you'll doubt whether you want to keep fighting, and you got to look at that thing, whatever it is. If it's your little boy or your little girl or your wife or your mother, someone you made a promise to, and that way you take it away from yourself and you're doing something bigger than yourself. And one of the keys in life is to do things that are bigger than ourselves. Agua Media is going to be bigger than myself. This might be my last rodeo, but you know what? This is important. There's a whole group of people out there, millions and millions and millions of them, who've never had somebody hold a mirror to them and say, this is who you are. You're one of the most powerful, you're one of the most powerful demographics in the world. Forget the United States. You, young African-American, you, young Latino, you, young Asian American, LGBT, whatever. And you know what? You deserve to have a voice. So this is what we're going to do. That's why I say, people ask me, what we're doing. And I say, we're creating a movement as much as anything else, because I think it's important.
Okay. During the creation of Agua Media and your journey to this point, what's been your biggest takeaway?
I think the biggest takeaway is that, I keep coming back to this, but you have to go back to when I was fired by CNN. That was humiliating. And I know it is. I mean, people get fired all the time. So I'm not trying to make my story a big one. You get fired, it hurts. In my case, it was humiliating because it was every single, late night comedian was making jokes about me. I couldn't get a job and I had to just start all over again and remake myself. And in the process of remaking myself, I had to discover skills within me that I did not have or did not know that I had. Now I used to make $800,000 a year working at CNN because I was a pretty well-paid anchor. And when I lost that, I didn't have any money, and I had a need. I had children, 4 kids that I had to feed. I had a wife that I had to feed, and I thought to myself, if I could translate my skill as a communicator, as a speaker, as a person who has a brand and is trusted by certain communities still,
right,
take that to South Florida and start a business with a couple of partners, especially in the healthcare field, which is so necessary in the United States, that would be something bigger than myself. So I got together with 2 partners. We decided to start a company, started from nothing. Basically, just we would go door to door at old folks' homes trying to sign up elderly residents who would become our patients, our members, essentially. And maybe we had 40, then 50, then 100. And by the end of this year, we expect to have 300,000. We're a $4.4 billion company. We're trading on the New York Stock Exchange. We're in Los Angeles, where I am today. We're in Miami, Palm Beach. We're in San Juan, Puerto Rico. We're in Vegas, Chicago. We are all over the United States and soon to be one of the largest healthcare companies. And it's because we really believed in it. We did something bigger than ourselves. And in my particular case, I just wanted to grow. And I grew by stretching myself. And sometimes when God gives you an opportunity to stretch yourself, that's when you really got to take it. That's when you grow.
Okay.
When you're comfortable, you don't grow so much. When you stretch yourself, you grow. So
yeah, stay in
kind of my
outside of your comfort zone. I agree with that 100%. Never thought I'd go from a turret to a pin, so to speak. Like, really?
Yeah, well, listen, I came to this country. We escaped from Cuba, and we were so poor. I mean, we had no money. My parents, at the best they ever did was $10,000 a year combined income. So I grew up in essential poverty in a barrio.
Right.
And I didn't speak English when I came to this country. I remember Mrs. McElvain, my first grade teacher, she wrote on my transcript that she thought I was mentally retarded.
Wow.
And she told my mom, she said, I think he suffers, back then that word was not so uncool.
Yeah.
And she wrote on there that I think he has some mental retardation issues. I'm not sure he's ever going to be able to learn, for example. And she just didn't figure out, because I was one of the first ones off the boat who came to the United States back then. I just didn't know how to speak English, and I was scared. So I was just a little boy in the back of the room.
I'm glad that you overcame that, and that your display of courage, first of all, to take on major media as a personality and say, I can do this, and I can represent my people and do it well, regardless of whether you want to really give me the opportunity or you're just playing like you want to give me the opportunity.
Yeah, exactly.
And that you've manifested several things that obviously have benefits for all of us in the minority community, though there may be a focus on the Latin plus community, but we're all beneficiaries. The same way that everyone's beneficiaries of the civil rights movement and what King did and what Shay did across the board. Everybody's benefited from those mavericks.
We stand on their shoulders.
We stand on their shoulders.
We stand on their shoulders. We do.
Last question, man. I got to ask you this because we're running short on time, and I appreciate the time that you've given me. I feel like it's a blessing. I appreciate it. What's been like the funniest WTF moment for you thus far in your career? You don't have to put anybody on blast, but something that just made you go, what the?
Oh God, where do I begin? Especially in television. I'm trying to think of some of the crazy moments that I had when I was on television, where I may have said something that was But I'm trying to think, Jerry, I'm trying to think of one that I could say that wouldn't offend people, because sometimes you can't help but offend some people when you say things. Yeah, here's one. I told you a little while ago that I interviewed President Obama, right?
Right.
National Hispanic Media Conference, Chicago. I fly up and I'm going to interview, and I'm trying to get an interview with Obama. It wasn't guaranteed. He's walking into the room and everybody's trying to hit him with questions and trying to get an interview with him. But being president and with these, the Secret Service, they're holding him back, and they're pushing people away. Not pushing, but, trying to keep people at bay.
Right. And
nobody's got a chance to have any access to him. And they're all asking him questions about policy and the Fed and what we're going to do with the situation that's going on in Iraq. And they're asking him about immigration because it was and of course, they're just typical questions. So I'm thinking, okay, this guy's not going to bite, right? That dog ain't going to hunt, right? So I got to take a different track. So it just so happened the night before I had done some research on him, and I realized this is candidate Obama, by the way. He's about to become president. And everybody kind of knew it, but that's why he was at the time kind of a rock star. He walks into the auditorium, everybody's trying to get him. I'm the only one. I come close, and I said, the night before I had watched him shooting baskets, and he was making 3-pointers in this video that had been released that I'd watched, I think, on one of the networks or something. So as he's walking by, I said, Mr. President, I watched a video of you last night shooting threes. Was that edited, or did you really make them?
Got his attention.
He turns around. The Secret Service is trying to push me back, essentially. He turns around. He says, no, let him through. Let him through. I want to talk to him. He looks at me. He goes, oh, I know. You're the guy on CNN, Rick Sanchez. I said, yeah. He goes, let me tell you something. I did, in fact, make those shots. And I can guarantee you, in fact, you know what? You call me. I want to show. And he was just so into it. He wanted to talk about basketball. See, that was his thing. That's what we all have, a passion, right? A thing we really love. Right. That was his passion. So he started talking about basketball. And then I was able to slip in some questions about immigration. I got the best and only interview with Obama because I was smart enough to not ask him the same damn question everybody else was asking. And that's how I got that interview with President Obama.
That's dope.
Interestingly enough.
I'm down to 60 seconds.
With Reagan, I had a guy who worked in the restaurant and he let me in the back door. So there you go.
Wow.
Who happened to be a childhood friend of my dad's. Okay. Sometimes we think journalism is all, sometimes it's all luck.
Sometimes it's all luck. I would love to have you back again, if you would permit me.
Sure.
There's just so much more. Agua Media is the new platform. It is a podcast network that's owned by Latinos. It's for the Latino plus community, which means they're including everyone. They're not excluding anyone, and which is more than we can say for some other platforms. I want to thank you, Mr. Rick Sanchez.
Love you, Jer. God bless you, man.
Peace and blessings now. All right.